Hello, 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 hello. Yes, welcome to the Time Tense channel. We're back again with another episode of the series Can Christians be blamed for the poverty in their countries? Or can Christians be blamed for the corruption in their governments? As much as possible, the answer to that question is what we are working on right now, even as we speak. I want you, after you've gone through the teachings I'm giving, you can have your own verdict of the matter. Actually, for the sake of history, I believe such narratives should be stopped. Actually, um, let's go to history. Let me share with you what I mean. Now, this is the story of Daniel and his friends, and these are nobles or nobles or sons of the elite that were selected by the king Nebuchadnezzar to serve in the palace before him, to serve as counselors to him. And after being called into the ministry, as nobles of um, Judah and people who had the potential to learn, he actually gave the criteria for the selection, and that was what I see here. And we look at it, Daniel chapter 1, verse 3 to 20. And the king speak unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring off certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, skillful in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge, understanding science, and such had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and tongue of the Chaldeans. The king appointed them a daily provision for the king's meat, of the king's meat, of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years. At the end, therefore, they might stand before the king. It's like they were being trained for diplomatic service or something of the sort. Now, among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, but with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. And God had brought Daniel into favor and eternal with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord, the king who had appointed your meat and your drink food. Why should he see your faces worse like him than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king? Then said Daniel to Meshach, whom the prince of the eunuchs has set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Prove thyself under the city 10 days, and let them give us fowls to eat and water to drink. Let our countenance be looked upon before thee, the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servant. So he consented to the matter. Consented he so he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. At the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer, fatter in flesh than all the children who did eat the portions of the king's meat. Here, observe that it has nothing to do with biology. This was some miracle that happened so that they could avoid eating meat that was sacrificed to idols. So you can see this was a group of people who were coming into the king's service, but they were coming making sure that their integrity was intact. Their integrity was intact to the point where even the food they would eat, they were making sure they broke protocol by eating something else, which was not sacrificed to idols. Now, it doesn't mean that they should be vegetarians. So that's what it means. And if we can read to the end, when we finish, we don't have much time to continue. Now, so um, we have what is this saying? Daniel, Meshach, and Abednego were determined Jewish young men who did not want to sin. They were determined to live righteously according to the dictates of the Torah. They were people that we could say were men of integrity. And they were called into the service of a heathen king, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the quintessential, you know, representation of all that can go wrong with a nation. I mean, all kinds of glamour, all kinds of, debauchery, all kinds of excesses, all kinds of self-worship and, all of those things and pride, because of human accomplishment. He was working for the kingdom like that, just as the same way the modern Christians work for governments of this of nature, governments that have, mass properties all over the place, powerful. I mean, an absolute sovereign to giving to them over the lands that their nation extends. And it's something similar like this that Daniel went into service to. And the purpose from the very beginning not to compromise. That they even decided not to eat something worse. So eat the food that was meant for the king himself. So we are answering, remember we answering the question, are Christians responsible for the poverty in developed countries? Are they responsible for the corruption in their government? Now let's read what do you call it is saying here. And we are taking example. We've taken example of Daniel, who is was an influential, righteous Jew in the government of Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, and Cyrus. I mean, three cool different kingdoms. I mean, not kingdom, but dynasties or rulerships or governments. He survived, the overthrow or the succession of Nebuchadnezzar by Darius, and he also was there to see Darius transition train into the hands of Cyrus. So he's the quintessential person that you can describe as being a professional, as being a civil servant in today's parlance. And how did he conduct himself? That's what we want to learn. We see whether the prosperity of Babylon was due to him or his poverty was due to him. What role did he play in the nation, even though he was a high-ranking officer? Now, uh, okay, so, but in all of this excellence for 3 years, that Daniel and his friends exhibited, but the Bible says that when they were tested, so they were 10 times better. And this test was not just any test, they were tested in everything. And when you read, let's go to the Daniel chapter 1, verse 20. It says, and the king communed with them, and among them, was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. In all matters of wisdom and understanding, when the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. In other words, these were the top of the top, the creme de la creme of civil service. And even those that had even had getting the support of demons in terms of astrology and magicians, even they could not compare to the natural Jehovah inspired wisdom that these people gave to the king. And this was an assessment done by the king himself. It was very important to him to decide to do the assessment himself. What am I driving at? These people were there when the king had a dream. They were there. Let's look at all of these people with all the righteousness they had exhibited, all their 3 years of schooling and everything. It did not change the Nebuchadnezzar one bit. It did not say that because people have excelled and you have been righteous and the rest, therefore I'm going to follow Jehovah. Therefore, I'm going to do things right. No, it didn't change Nebuchadnezzar. Indeed, he actually went on business as usual. When you read Daniel chapter 2, verse 26, it said, the king dreamt a dream. And this time, having been tricked severally by his astrologers and others, he decided that he was not going to share the dream, but that the astrologers were supposed to come and tell him the dream, since he had said he had some supernatural power. Tell him the dream he had dreamt, and also tell him the meaning. And as they were rounding up all of these advisors who failed to do this thing, proving to him that all this while they've just been using their mind to advise him, he decided they should round up all of these wise men and just destroy them. Just as they were about to arrest Daniel, Daniel had not heard of the event. Daniel heard of what was going on, went to the king for permission to go and seek for the answer, went into the closet with his friends, Shadrach, and Abednego, and prayed until God revealed the dream to him. It was when the dream had been revealed to him and I was going back to the king to give the answer that the Daniel chapter 2, verse 26 talks about. And the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered the person of the king and said, the secret which the king had demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, shew unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, making known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon the bed are these. So here, Daniel is introducing this powerful king to the God of heaven. And he said, it's only the God of heaven, O king, who could have revealed this to me. I'm not here like one of your trained magicians or astrologers. No, I'm here because I serve a superior God to you, Nebuchadnezzar. That's what he was telling. So here Daniel has having the boldness to literally witness to a king who considered himself as a god. He was there telling him, you are no God, but there's a God above you. And it's that God above you that has revealed these things to me. That's what he was telling the king. And the king was interested because he knew he had such audacity because he knew the answer. Remember, they were going to kill him before he actually found the answer. So after he had said these things, uh, then he proceeded to tell him, he said, as for you, king, as for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed. What should come to pass thereafter? And he that revealeth secret maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. This Gipton is still there. I have watched a program where the prophet was able to say the dream of somebody who was not even there. And when the person was called, he narrated the dream exactly the way he had narrated. So it is indeed the Spirit of God that can reveal secrets in a man's mind. Now, after Daniel had foretold the king what will come after him, the kingdoms that will come after his reign, and explained to him what he's supposed to do. He actually became okay. So let's look at people normally talk about influence, and they want to talk about how much of an influence can Christians be on the government, on the system, on the nation. Here, the king had absolute power. So all you needed to, the only person you needed to influence at any point in time was the king. And here Daniel was working hard at letting the king recognize that there's a God in heaven or superior to the God of Babylon. So um, let's take it from verse 45. As Daniel was so speaking, explaining the dream to him. Daniel said, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain which without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God had made known to the king what shall come to pass there hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. What did King Nebuchadnezzar do? Bible says that he cut down from his awesome throne. Then the king, what it says, Nebuchadnezzar, fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded what that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. In other words, the king's understanding of what had happened was not to give glory to the God of heaven, but to give glory to Daniel. In other words, the king turned Daniel into a god and worshipped him, and called others and caused others to worship him too. 47. Then the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and the Lord of lords and the revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man. Daniel was already great, but the king actually made him a very great man. And gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. And here, Daniel had then assumed the power that he could change things because now he had been named the prime minister, just as um, Joseph was made the prime minister of an empire and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel's personal relation with God, because it had now affected the ruler, has now translated him into the chief governor of all governors. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. You see, here when Daniel got an opportunity, got an influence, he brought in more Christians. He brought in more Christians. So this is what we are really, really, really talking about actually. When we talk about Christian influence. You could see until Daniel had been in government for a while, but until he could influence the king, he had no real power. So it's not surprising that the Bible is saying down here that it was after Daniel's revelation of this dream that he was made a great man. And it is the same thing happening in our time. It doesn't matter what you believe. If that belief does not affect those who matter in your country, it will not change anything because they are the ones that can change something. Okay, so basically, Daniel and his friends excelled in Babylon, but they did not change the Babylonian society. There was no fundamental change in Babylonian society, even though Daniel and his friends were people of integrity. The people of integrity. And it didn't change the culture of the Babylonians. In fact, it was after this incident that the throwing of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire came in. It was after this incident. Someone would have thought that after the king had, been told of the greatness of the God of heaven, and after knowing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the rest, that these things would not come. But it was after this that these things still came about. The Bible says that after these matter, King Nebuchadnezzar made an idol of gold and asked everybody to worship it. He did not actually transform. It just, changed for a while. It's happening. That's the same thing happening in our government. If you're a Christian in our government, your voice is not heard. It's just heard for a little while. And then they just forgot about it. See, the only time people want Christians to become part of their life is when it has to do with corruption and development. But all other things, they don't want anything Christian to come in. As a young woman, they don't want anything Christian to come into their sexual life. As a young man, they don't want anything Christian to come into their sexual life. They don't want anything Christian to come to their work life. And yet it is fine if Christianity can talk about corruption, if Christianity can tackle cleanliness, but it is not fine when Christianity also want to tackle sexual immorality, wants to talk about corruption. So that is a paradox that we face. While Jesus was speaking to people, he said, people are like children who are playing in the marketplace. When your friends play for you at that, they not cry. When they play for you, play some music to you, also did not dance. So what should they do for you? When Christians are trying to influence societal policy, you have backlashes like, it's not everybody who goes to church. We all don't share the same church. We all don't share the same belief. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And then when nothing good happens, then somebody also gets up and say that nothing good is happening because Christians are doing nothing. but because they are in the majority. It's one of the ploys the enemy uses to make Christians unpopular. Don't fall for it. Now we have, um, as I've said, Daniel grew, influence grew and grew. But what happened to Daniel? Even with all that he had achieved, what happened to him? Nebuchadnezzar, of course, obviously went there. And then Darius came. And then what happened? Now, Daniel chapter 6, verse 1 says, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, 120 princes or satraps. These three presidents, there were these 120 presidents, of whom Daniel was first. In other words, he has set up a system of first the prime minister, then two presidents, then under them 120 princes. That was a vast kingdom. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes because an excellent spirit was on him. The king thought to set him over the whole land. So Daniel was not just delivering dreams from, interpretation of dreams from time to time, having vision from time to time. His work ethics was said that an excellent spirit was found upon him. He just was a servant at anything that was given him. And he pleased the king so much. And this is a different king, who can come to overthrow Nebuchadnezzar, Darius had come to overthrow Nebuchadnezzar, called Darius. And here he had also come and heard of Daniel's exploits and had also employed Daniel. Daniel had also pleased him well, and he was about to actually set Daniel also above all. During Nebuchadnezzar's time, Daniel was put in charge of the whole kingdom. So it was not a job he didn't even have experience in. He had done such a job before. But when Darius came, of course, this is a new person. So there were opposition, there were people screaming for that position. Therefore, it took a while before Darius also realized that no, this man is just fit to be at the top. So he was about to do these things when the unbelievers conspired against him. And if you ask any Christian who had made an attempt to change anything in his country, you are faced by dominant Christians. You are faced by people who think on the outside are Christians, but are actually agents of the devil. And Daniel actually had a decree made purposely against him so that he will not worship God, he will not serve God. And Daniel, knowing the decree had come forth, went straight and continued serving God. So this is a man that we cannot fault in any way, shape, or form. And yet he still had kings that were not reforming, kings who acknowledged the great gift of God upon his life and acknowledged the greatness of his God. And yet these kings themselves were not transforming. So nothing was changing in Babylon. After the king then had signed this decree and then had been thrown into the lions and the king was sad, the king, when he got to the den and realized that no, Daniel was still alive, uh, and then he then had to say this thing. Okay, so after this conspiracy had worked against Daniel, these people decided to make sure that Daniel was killed so that they will have their field day. And it happens all over in every institution in the world. Those who are doing the wrong thing are the majority, and they are all over the place. Once you want to change something, the inconvenience and brings is so much that you have a gathering, so you have to go and defend. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. There were instruments of music brought before him, and the sleep went before him. So the king so loved Daniel that he actually was sad that his decree had caught up with him, and that Daniel was in the lions den, probably being eaten by lions. So the very morning he came back to check. The Bible said he cried with a loud, lamentable voice, Daniel. And what did the king say? Let's read this part. People Christian, this is a serious person who was serving God, even in his office as one of the princes of Darius. He said, and when he came to the day, he cried and lamented well unto that, and the king spake and said, oh, that a servant of the living God. So the king knew that Daniel was serving the living God. Is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? In other words, the king saw this relationship that he had with God and did not want to be part of it, even though he respected it. And that's the scenario in mostly around Christians who are in public service. People know your God is doing well. People respect your principle. People respect your integrity, but they don't want to have anything to do with your God because they're not ready to submit themselves to that scrutiny, level of scrutiny. Okay, so and when Daniel actually survived the lions there, um, it caused the king, as usual, to make a decree. You know, it brought some change of heart for the king. And usually, for anything to change in the country, you need the leadership to write laws, make decrees, and the rest. So it caused Darius to make a decree. The King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations, and languages that were in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of a kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. So here is a king trying to cause a whole nation to turn around and follow the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. And he delivered and rescued, and he worked signs and wonders in heaven and earth, who had delivered Daniel from the power of the land. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So here we are told after even Darius, when King Persia, Cyrus also came, Daniel also prospered in his reign. So this somebody who has transitioned several emperors, and yet, somehow his influence on the nation was not being felt, even though his prophetic insight was not in doubt and all of those things. And that is typically how every Christian finds himself in the midst of a secular society. Uh, okay, so one of the greatest disservice that was done when it comes to Christianity and Christianity and the grace. Okay, so um, Daniel Daniel's exploit as a righteous person is not in doubt, and all the three kings acknowledge the God of heaven. But there's nowhere in the Bible where you see a statement that says that Babylon became a Jewish country, or that Babylon then went back to the serving of Jehovah. No, Babylon benefited, and the Persians they benefited from Daniel's insight, Daniel's personal knowledge of God, Daniel and his friends' personal knowledge of God, and they made decrees that God should be respected, but they did not lead their countries to transition to the worship of Jehovah. Why am I emphasizing this point? I'm emphasizing this point because until a nation transitions to the respect and love of Jehovah, of God, by instituting laws, by um, setting up policies, by enforcing decrees, development will not come. Poverty will not be removed because poverty is something that is being done and it takes laws, decrees, policies to undo them. And when those policies are even set and they are not enforced to the letter, it will not achieve the purpose of stopping poverty or stopping corruption in the government. So it doesn't matter how many Christians there are over there until every the critical mass of the people decide to change their mind and act in another way, nothing will change. And I wrote somewhere in my what they call it notes here that personal righteousness of a believer does not change national behavior. It's a fact that most people fail to understand. The fact that you are righteous does not mean it's a national policy. The fact that you fear God does not mean it's a national policy. The fact that you want the best for your country does not mean the nation has adopted such a policy. No, it's something you want, but it has not been adopted by the nation. And that understanding, if it is truly taken, is saving it. We're going to save everybody a lot of stress. While the stress of wanting Christians to change everything, because it just doesn't. It just doesn't work. Actually, there's no civilization where Christians have changed everything. Actually, there's no civilization like that. Um, in the times when Christians' effort was at its best, like during the time of Constantine in the fourth century. I mean, when the power of the papacy was vigorous time in the West, when the power of the papacy was at its height, when at a point in time even the emperors of most of Europe ceded to the power of the Pope. Mostly it was just collaborative power with the Pope and the Emperor. Since even there, that's when they're able to change many things, change many policies. But even there, it's sort of many of the popes had to descend into the gutter of administration because whenever you take political power, you need to enforce it with force. And there were a lot of inquisitions, there were a lot of killings and the rest, which were contrary to Christianity. What a Christian can do is to be an example in his corner. But that is all that he can do. Apart from influencing the people in authority, what he can do is to be good so that others will learn from him. He will not change national policy. Neither will it bring out a policy or law that will reduce poverty. No. People who do these things, who want to blame Christians, do these things so that they will not blame the people who they really need to blame. The people in charge. Um, uh, so let's look at one of the things I wrote here. Now, change comes when the righteous influence men and women of power. So we see in the instance of Daniel, he influenced the Nebuchadnezzar, he influenced Darius, he influenced Cyrus. And because of that, decrees were written. And because of that, I'm sure there was a growth in the worship of Jehovah in the empire and the rest, because the king himself acknowledged, and therefore there was also freedom to worship these things. Even though in many other conquests, freedom of worship was allowed, like in the case of the Mongols. Here, it was not just allowed, it was encouraged, actually. So there were a lot of Jews in the kingdom who later returned to Jerusalem, who later returned to other places. And then we also have the fourth one. Um, Change only comes. So the only thing Christians can do is to inspire change in decrees, in laws, in policy, and ensure that the authorities in charge enforce these laws. That's the only way Christians can can affect an economy. Actually, can help boost an economy or can help bring down corruption. You know, and if you look at it, the after the Babylonian conquest and the rest, Jerusalem was destroyed. Was destroyed. And after the Assyrians had destroyed Israel, um, so it was lying in ruins. The same way many countries in Africa after the despotic rule of colonial masters for sometime as long as it lasted for about 200 years and all of that. After they left us high and dry, you know, it needed people to rebuild it. And many of the post-colonial presidents were presidents that were adjusting to rulership of the nation. And many of them started trying. But after the nations had been ruined, and after they had run an economy to a point where we could only produce raw material for them to turn into something and bring it back to us, it was hard to actually turn the country around. And it was hard to turn it around. and they're always ready to pounce on our weaknesses. So the question you ask ourselves is that all of these people are referring to, including myself, of course, some they went to church actually, they were nominal Christians. They went to church and the rest. What has changed? What had changed them was the teachings of the church to go into the world and make disciples. What was the teachings of the church that impressed upon them to treat their slaves well, to treat to love people as themselves, not only to love God. All of these teachings are Christian teachings that when adopted will prosper in the nation. The problem is that people don't want to adopt them. They don't want to adopt them because they are selfish. And instead of them admitting that it's because they are not adopting these things, that is why it's not having the critical mass needed for it to explode. It will not, they always say that way. They have all other kinds of excuses. Now, Nehemiah could only rebuild Jerusalem because he had the support of the king Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes sent to give him a letter as he was going and asked everybody who could help to help. He asked the governors who were there to help. And that's how Christians can make any meaningful impact when they have political support, political will. Well, Zerubbabel and as who was also the son of Joachim, the grandson of Joachim, a descendant of David. He was also appointed by King Cyrus of Persia, Persia, to go to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And he also led, he didn't only rebuild the temple, he also rebuilt the city by them rebuilding their houses and all of those things. So here we have another instance where even for those who were widely influenced, righteous and the rest, it took political power for them to make any impact in the nations in which they live. Without political power, one president in Ghana, a former president in Ghana said, seeking first the political kingdom, and all other things have been added onto it. Meaning that you needed to have political power to implement any decision that you thought was good for anybody. Without it, you were not allowed. Your influence can only go so far. So that is that. What we are telling people is that when there are economic problems, they should blame the people that they are paying to solve them, the politicians. And we should stop letting them off the hook so that they can continue to, you know, do to us what they are doing to us. We should let them know clearly we don't like their services, that their services are not righteous, their services are not humane. We must let them know these things so that when they next time they see and they'll sit up as to what they are doing for their nation to lift it up. Actually, so it's the end of part 2 of the series. Can Christians be blamed? Can Christians be blamed uh, for their corrupt government or for the economic woes that their countries suffer? Yes. So thank you so much for watching the second part and stay tuned for the third part.